I'm Aryeh Schwartz along with Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Today, I'm honored to welcome to the show one of the best in the game, the DMV legend. You know her voice and you know her face, the one, the only, Christy Winters-Scott. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our staff's amazing written content at winsidr.com. While you're there, check out the Overseas Tracker. It's live now, and you can see where your favorite WNBA players are playing overseas all in one place. And remember, downloading the episode makes our stats look better and allows us to continue doing this important work. Christy Winters-Scott, welcome to the show. So happy and excited to have you on. How are you doing and what are you up to these days?
Oh my goodness, you guys, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat hoops. I'm up to hoops all the time. I am so excited about the upcoming WNBA season, just still thriving on the excitement that was left from the NCAA tournament this past spring, and just being a mom and just caring for my mom as we head into Mother's Day. I love it. So all is well. Everyone's healthy and I'm happy and ready to attack another day.
Well, happy early Mother's Day. And very excited to hear that you get that chance to hang out with your mom. How excited are you for this WNBA season? I mean, last year, I don't even know what you call last year for the Mystics, a wash, an opportunity for young players to finally get the spotlight. I mean, there's positives, there's negatives, but going into the season, I mean, how excited are you just to see is it weird for me to call it the Mystics now that they have like the big players back, or is that mean? I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, I feel like I did prior to knowing all of the players who were going to opt out last year for the Mystics. I am that much excited about this year. I think last year, I don't think it was a wash. I think, like you said, a lot of the younger players, they really earned their stripes. And my gosh, Myisha Hines-Allen earning all league honors because of her consistent, efficient performance last year. I think that was a real plus. And so if they didn't have that, Myisha Hines-Allen and all those younger players like Shug Sutton, I mean, those players had opportunities to get on the floor and produce in the system. So I think they're better served for that this year. I know a lot of different faces, but what I'm really intrigued by is the addition of Tina Charles to this mix. And everyone was anticipating it last year. We didn't get to see that with Emma and Della Don and how they were going to utilize all those posts with, obviously with Hawkins and Latoya Sanders. Like, it was just so like mind boggling, all of the different rotations that could have looked like. So I think for me this year, I'm just intrigued by how Tina Charles is going to be inserted into this system. And she's already played for Mike Tebow when she was with Connecticut. She was an MVP of the league in 2012 under his tutelage that season. So, I just know that from what I've heard on the calls so far, because I haven't been able to be in person for any of the training camp sessions, Tina Charles is looking like beyond phenomenal. And that's a lot to be said for someone who has missed the season, and she's like in a new system in terms of the people being around her, the players being around her. I'm excited about that. I've heard Tina Charles is knocking in threes on a consistent basis.
Ooh.
I've heard that Tina Charles is a one of many initiators of offense for Washington this season. If you think about what Myisha Hines-Allen was able to do as an initiator last year, like getting it off the glass and pushing it up the middle of the floor, apparently Tina Charles has been doing that. And I'm intrigued by that. Like, you think of Tina Charles and you think of 20 and 10 consistently. That's her average on her career, right? But she's added a 3 ball. She's added, some stronger ball handling skills in the open court. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, let me see, like, pull the curtain back so I can take a look at that. So I'm just really thrilled about Cloud being back and Ariel Atkins kind of meshing with that voice of Cloud being back. That to me, I think has been kind of a question I've asked in a couple different ways on media day and in a couple of the post-practice calls, just to see what that leadership looks like. And Mike Tebow always says it's the team that leads the team. And I get that. But there are always the voices that you look for on your team to get them over the hump when things aren't going well. Like, it can't just always be the coach. Like, who are those people? And to me, that's always a question that I'd like to have answered, because that's a big piece of success. And your coach is definitely going to always be the leader in many ways. But when you have players who command that kind of leadership and ownership of that role, I mean, that can't be taught. So I always like to know what that looks like. And last year it had to be Ariel Atkins, right? I mean, there were a lot of missing pieces in terms of having that deliberate, intentional, vocal strength and leadership. And, Atkins says she's not going to step back from that she learned so much from having to do it last year. And Cloud is there, yes, but so is everybody else. And she's just going to continue with that. And Mike Tebow says, yeah, we have to remind Ariel Atkins, like, we need that still. Like, we don't want you just because Tosh is back to, go back to not saying much, but obviously leading by example. But they need that mentality. They need that toughness. And I think Ariel Atkins is going to be the glue to the team this year.
You bring up so many good points, and we're going to get to a ton of Mystic stuff. I'm really excited to understand kind of your thoughts and what you're seeing. But real fast, I want to backtrack. I want to talk about you a little bit. A lot of people know you as the analyst and recognize you on TV. But I do want to kind of just talk about your journey from Virginia to Maryland and give the listeners who may not understand your own basketball journey a little bit of background on you.
Oh, wow. Well, Rachel, that's a great question. And, it's been a journey. It has definitely been a journey. And, if you would have told my 10-year-old self that this would be where I am in life right now, in terms of being a mom of 3, number one, and, having the basketball experiences that I've had, both as a player and a coach, I don't know if she would have believed that that could have happened. But just flashing back to that 10-year-old, and even before that, we moved to Reston, Virginia when I was 8 years old. And that's when I played basketball for the first time on a team. We had a hoop on our driveway when I was, 6, I believe. My dad put that up for us. And we messed around with that, but we never played on a team. My brother and I, he's only 13 months older than I am, but I wanted to do everything that he did. So when we moved to Reston, we got a hoop in the backyard. All of his friends, my brother's friends, would come over and play. And to my brother's chagrin, most times, I would be out there too. And my mom's like, just let her go out there. I'm like, yeah, just let me go out there. So I was out there and just learning how to play the game and learning how to compete. And it was just organic to start with. And like I said, played on my first youth team and Reston youth basketball, but really loved the competitive spirit that the game presented. And the challenges of the game, I think, really enticed my interest in playing the game. And I guess it was middle school, 7th grade, I started playing AAU basketball. Played for the Vogues of Virginia. That was the only AAU team here. There were 3 levels, A, B, and C team. The A team went to the national tournament, which was what you wanted, right? So on our national team, I believe once we all graduated high school, I believe 11 of the 12 of us got Division I scholarships to play ball. And it was, that's why it was so special, because now obviously the opportunities are immense now for AAU basketball, and there are hundreds of teams, which is great. But when you have that one team that just encapsulates like the DMV in total, like we have players from DC, Maryland, and Virginia all on that one team. And that was the team in the area. Man, there was nothing like that. I don't care. Like, just practices were like the best. Our competition, like we played against some great teams nationally, and still remember a lot of the names. I played against during that stretch, like Pokey Chapman. We played against her Dominoes team, down in Louisiana.
That's
And then
amazing.
Jennifer Azie's team. She was from Tennessee. It was the Tennessee Stars. We played them. And she went on to Stanford, and we were the same class, so we kept track of them. It's just weird how it all flashes back. But AAU was a fantastic experience for me throughout high school. Went to South Lakes after that, and we ended up winning a state championship in my senior year. And we were 29-0, won the state championship game by 2 points. Our point guard sprinted in front of their best player and took a charge at the buzzer. I swiped at that shot. I may or may not have gotten a fingernail on something other than basketball. So all I heard was a whistle. And, I look over at the ref, and he has his hand on the back of his head. And I was like screaming my head off until I saw white spots. And I was running and jumping and having like a freak out. But yeah, so it was a lot of pressure, obviously, playing that season because, we were undefeated. And for every game we won, and I'm not saying this in a pompous manner at all, but, we get to 25-0, right? Senior year, we had 6 seniors. 27-0. We're like, oh snap, right? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you can't. Once you get that far, you can't lose.
Can't lose, man. So then I remember our coach. It was like a back and forth game in the state championship game, and she came in the locker room, and we were all like talking to each other, like, "Listen, we're not going out like that. Like, boom, boom, boom. Like, let's go. We gotta get together." Da 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 da. And she came in the locker room, and she said, "You guys are playing not to lose instead of playing to win." We're like, yeah. I had never thought of the game that way, but that's exactly what our coach, Jill English, told us. We went out there, and it was still back and forth. But I think that edge that we had was, we wanted to win. We played to win instead of trying to protect, not losing, and there's such a fine line between that. It was like such a tightrope and a circus, a mental circus is what I like to call that moment. But to win that and then to be in complete tears because we weren't going to play any more games, that's a moment I'll never forget. We were pulling up to the school, and we were just having a good old time on the bus, like yucking it up. And then, the blinker came on to turn into the school. We're like, wait, like, this is it. And it was horrible. It was horrible, but it was happy. But it was horrible at the same time. I can't even explain it. And then, you never, like, either way, you end your year with tears. It's it's like tears of joy or
always,
or whatever. Like, either way, I don't know. That's tough to explain. But to win that was definitely a defining moment. And then went on to Maryland to play, and I was recruited by a couple of schools that were just well respected and still are to this day. Georgia and Andy Landers. NC State and the late great Kay Yao, Renee Portland, the late great Renee Portland, and obviously Debbie Ryan at Virginia was amazing. And then Maryland, those are my top schools at the end of the day. And I went on a visit to all the schools, and when I went to Maryland, there was just something about the campus, something about the team, something about the spirit of the school and the atmosphere there that I just fell in love with completely. I could be myself there. And I think that's what got me to sign on the dotted line. And that was probably the most challenged I've ever been in my life, other than childbirth of three babies, physically and mentally challenged to the 1000th degree. It was, they always say like between 18 and 22, those are your formative years. And I know they say also between 0 and 5, I get it, but 18 to 22, like that's when you learn what you're all about and why you're doing things. And, the transfer portal having, 17% of the players from this past season are rotating insane through that thing. Man, listen, come on now, you guys. I couldn't do it. And I couldn't do it in conference. Like, I could not want to beat your head in and beat your team so badly, and then the next year go sit in that locker room with those people. I'm built differently that way, and I'm not bragging, but I could never do it. I could never do that. And I mean, some people can, and I see some comments where people say, thank you for my time here. I'm moving on to the portal. I'm like, goodness gracious, like another one. And I'm sending, text messages to my girl, Lisa Byington, because we're on the string, we're on the hotline, and I send her another one. She sends me something. We're like, geez, like what's happening? Like boom, 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 like back and forth, like Venus and Serena. And it is crazy. And it's just, and the comments underneath, like, yeah, do you boo and all this. I'm like, no, don't do you boo. Like lean into it for a minute and see what you're made of. What are you doing?
Face the adversity a little bit more.
Honestly, but I really honestly think social media, like we didn't have social media and all that stuff coming through. So I don't know if it's like, look at all these people who want me. Is that what this looks like? Is that what we're doing? Like, but whatever. I ended up at Maryland. We went to the Final Four junior year, and it was amazing. We went to Elite Eight sophomore year. We lost to Auburn with the Mayola Boltons and Ruthie Boltons and Vicky Orrs of the world. They took us out. We were down there in Auburn, and they smashed us 100 and some to 70 something. And it was sad. And I just remember being on the free throw line on a rebound. You're standing there and somebody's shooting. I don't even know which team was shooting. I was just so angry. It was 2 minutes left. We were getting flattened. And, I look up and they have all the poster boards like, we're going to the Final Four. And I was like, I was enraged. I was so mad, But we were young. We were sophomores and juniors that year. So the next year, we were 26-6 that year. We lost to Auburn. And the next year, we ended up 29-3. And we were a 1 seed and went to the tournament in Washington State. I believe we were in, was it Seattle? I think the men were in Seattle and we were in Tacoma. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry for recalling like that, but I had to think. But it was an amazing ride. We ended up going into that. We were 29-2 and played Tennessee in the semifinal game. And Tennessee ended up winning the whole thing. I think it was Auburn, who we had lost to earlier in that season in November in some tournament in Miami, I believe. And then we lost to Clemson in conference. We were the ACC then. They had locked us in that whatever, Tiger's Den there. And the lion was roaring. And it was like this crazy, like we were not ourselves. And we ended up losing by like 1 or something. And that was like our only conference loss. So whatever. But that was a wake up call for us, because then after that we were, on task and kind of played through that, beat Texas at Texas, broke their 30 something game win streak with Clarissa Davis and Andrea Lloyd. Oh my gosh. They had so many great players. I can't rattle them off. Erin Barr, I believe she was like 6'8" center. Then they had a 6'5", 6'4". Their wing player was like 6'2", and their point guard was, they were humongous. And the practice before that, our assistant coach had brooms in the paint, like smacking shots away. And we thought it was funny. We were like, Vicky Bullitt and I were the post, and we were like 6'2", 6'3". Okay. And Vicky Bullitt, 2-time Olympian, just magnificent footwork, amazing player on the glass, defender, like amazing. So we're in there, and the coach is like blocking our shots with a broom. And we were like, oh, that's messed up. And some of the stuff would come off the broom, the boom, hit the ball, and some of the stuff would fall. And we're like, oh, that's messed up. That's funny. And then Coach Weller was like, it's not going to be funny. We're playing these giants down at Texas, and they're throwing your shots all over. We're like, yeah, that's right. We got to get it together. Stop laughing. And like, we got tightened up. But we ended up beating them. I think it was close. It was like by 5 or 6 points on their court. Cheryl Miller was the analyst on that game.
Oh, that's amazing.
She was my hero. So in the warm-up line before that game, I kept looking over there. The ball was coming to me, and it was like right at my hip, like, because I was staring at Cheryl Miller the whole time. I was just watching her. I was like, this is crazy, Cheryl Miller. So all the other 3 teams had stamped their tickets. So we were the last game. It was like 9 o'clock. So we had to wait all day for it. But boy, I tell you, there was nothing like that buzzer going off and the relief of knowing that we got over that hump and we were headed to the Final Four. And there's probably 14,000 fans. We probably had, our band and maybe some parents, and that was it. We couldn't really hear our fans that much. No shade, but it was, oh my God, the floor was shaking every time they did one thing well, and it was insanely loud in there. So after we won, we were cutting the nets down, and they were all standing there with the hook'em horns up in the air, and it was silent. It was the most eerie thing. But we were like, yeah, hurry up and get these nets so we can get out of here. This is scary. So, yeah, we ended up rolling out of there and lost Tennessee in the Final Four. But, you know, again, we were talking about the tears a moment ago. Like, that was so crushing. And just looking back now, that was such an amazing ride. But being in it, you don't set your mind up to lose. So at the moment, I mean, it was devastating, right? But now looking back years later, it's like, that was a great run. And you just don't really appreciate it until you have, you know, the years go by and you reflect on it. And every time I reflect, it's always March, except for last year, obviously. But every year it's like, you know, you reflect on what it took to get there. We only had 8 players. We didn't have practice teams. Like, we practiced 3 or 4 hours a day. There were no limits. We're in the weight room, study halls and all that. So, you know, things have changed, but I wouldn't trade that for anything. And how tough it was, you know, riding bus rides to Clemson and back after losing that one game was not good. 8 hours on the bus after a loss. But, you know, we didn't have charter flights. There's so many things that have occurred in the women's game to advance it, to give the respect that it's due. But then you see what happened this year. You saw Sedona Prince documenting, you know, and we still have a ways to go. But it's so much more advanced in terms of equity than it was in the past. And we just wanted to play. So we didn't have, again, social media and cell phones, but we were just grateful to be competing. And I didn't even know we were 1 seed until this year. Somebody told me. I was like, we were 1 seed? Like, oh my God. And that's so bad because, you know, like, social media just kind of lets you know everything now. But, you know, we just knew we were doing well, and we knew that we had made the tournament, and we were just going to win throughout, as 6 games we needed to win. And that was in front of us. And I know that sounds really naive, but honestly, that was our mentality. And that's what we were talking about. Win the next one and keep it going. And, you know, asking each other, are you ready before the game? And I'm ready if you're ready was the answer that you're supposed to give. And that was how it went. And we just laced them up and rolled out there and fought as hard as we could. And, you know, that was that. But I loved my time at Maryland. Ended up going to Sweet 16 as a senior, but it was a great experience and a great ride and a great challenge of character and everything that it took to be successful are things I still tap into non-basketball. The mental toughness of a lot of things, I have relied upon that experience a lot.
I honestly, I just want to spend like 3 hours picking your brain about all those stories, because there's just so many like small details that we pass over. And like hearing you talk about doing those long drives, the experiences, you know, no one talks about the experience of winning a championship and realizing, or, you know, whatever level of championship it is, and then realizing, wait, we're not going to have this team together again. And you have that in the W, you have that in A, you have that all over, and nobody really talks about, you know, there's that sadness even in winning. I mean, you look at, heck, the Seattle Storm this past year, that team got broken up. And can you imagine if you were sitting in the bubble, the wubble, whatever you want to call it, and you just won it, and you're sipping your champagne and you're looking around and you're like, Sammy Wickham already went over to Australia, so we already lost her, and now we're in the, you know, and those are just the stories that, all right, well, I'm getting off topic here. Let's talk about the Mystics. Let's talk about the Mystics. You touched on a lot of really interesting aspects, kind of what some takeaways you've gotten from this training camp period. And I just want to give the fans a little bit of a background. You know, EDD injured last year / decided not to play. Tina Charles opts out. Natasha Cloud opts out of playing. So I heard, I haven't been able to take part in enough of their calls as I'd like to, but in one of the calls, I heard Coach T talking about kind of trying to find a balance of, we have players who have been playing literally up until last week overseas. And then we have players who haven't played for 18 months. And some of them are coming back from injuries. Some of them are just getting in game shape and trying to, you know, find that balance of not working them too hard where there's some injuries that set them back, especially because you're already down one with Alicia Clark. Yeah. So I'm curious for you. Last year, this team shocked everybody with an insanely strong start, right? Like that start was mind blowing. But this year, I almost feel like they're setting up expectations for I don't want to say a weak start, but not like the strongest start new teammates, new starters, new everything. Do you think that it's a ridiculous idea that this team is going to, take some time to hit its full stride?
No, I think that's spot on. And that's the thing, with Mike Tebow. I mean, he's been a wizard in terms of being able to function with who he has available. And last year, oh my gosh, with all the opt-outs, and then Ariel Powers got hurt, 6 games in, I believe, 5 or 6 games in, and then she left the bubble, and it was just a myriad of issues that were just piling on. And Hawkins wasn't healthy; she was in, she was out. But I think for what they were able to do, they started out 3-0, and then hit a huge speed bump with all of the injuries and whatnot. But then they had the wherewithal and apparently took a ride on the boat down there, took a day off, and just decompressed, disconnected from that environment, and just pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and made themselves a playoff caliber team down the stretch. And it took them to the last game of the regular season to clinch it, but they did it. And I just think that speaks volumes for who Mike Tebow and his staff have on the roster, but it also speaks to how he's able to get the best out of those players on the roster. And that, to me, will always be at the top of the list for Mike Tebow, the winningest coach in the WNBA for a reason. I think that he understands that fact that you said, some people are just getting back. Their bodies are a little beat up from playing overseas. Maisha Hines-Allen probably won't be back for a little bit because her team in France is still playing in the playoffs. And, they may not be done for a couple of weeks. And that's the league that Eric Tebow said on a recent call that usually takes the longest to finish. So they're waiting on a couple people still to get back in the fold. But with that being said, Elena Delle Donne's health this year is, to me, still up in the air in terms of minutes restriction possibility for her to start the season. And that's going to make a difference to how they start the year as well. I think they're going to need that depth, especially on the interior, especially now that LaToya Sanders has slidden off the basketball court and slid it into an assistant coach's role. They don't really have that depth that they have been used to on the interior. But, like we said, Tina Charles is there now, and they have viable players who will make their presence felt in terms of how Mike Tebow wants to spread the floor, be a 3-and-D team. And that's what they have. I mean, Natasha Cloud and Leilani Mitchell, that's a duo that is very intriguing to me, because I asked, I think, Mike Tebow on Media Day if he thought that they would be kind of utilized like he utilized Cloud and Tolliver. And I meant that by saying they would both be on the court at the same time. Like, you don't have to sub one for the other, but maximize both of them being on the floor at the same time. Natasha Cloud showed in the 2019 championship campaign that her 3-ball is like that. She's ready to strike from out there. Leilani Mitchell can hit it too. Like, she led the league in 3-point percentage when she was with Phoenix. So, you have all these players who can knock shots in from outside. You also have playmakers. Ariel Atkins, a player who can knock in the 3, obviously. She can get to the rim, and that mid-range game is coming along for her. I just think, again, she's going to be the glue. But just to see how these players materialize, I think that's going to be interesting. And Shavonte Zealous is going to be a big piece in terms of that championship mentality. She played, obviously, in New York with Tina Charles, so there's some chemistry there with her. Teresa Plaisance is another player on the interior that'll give them that depth that we were talking about would be necessary. But Leslie as well, I think, she can be kind of a tweener in terms of being able to knock in that 3, a 3-and-D player, but she can board and defend multiple positions. So she gives you that flexibility as well. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see, you have everything mixed in the bowl. Now it's time to stick it in the oven, and, we'll see what that looks like for this team. But I think, we definitely have to keep our eyes on Elena Delle Donne. She definitely wants to play USA basketball with the Olympic Games coming up mid-season. We definitely have to keep our eyes on the fact that Emma Miesemann may or may not return after the Olympic break with her overseas commitments in that regard. So I think there are a lot of questions more than answers for Washington at the beginning of the year. and I want to get my eyes on them so badly. So I can really tell. I mean, the Zooms are great access, but there's nothing like being in the gym, and I can't wait to get in there and actually form some solid opinions from what I actually see. So that's going to answer a lot of questions when I actually get in there and I'm able to watch some things.
Well, that brings up a good point. I mean, you talked about everything's in the mixing bowl. Now it's time to put it in the oven. In your opinion, from what you can tell right now, again, I know it's early without being able to lay your eyes on what's been going on in training camp. What do you think is the potential ceiling for this team versus, on the flip side, the floor of this team for this year?
Well, I think the Mystics are definitely still a contender. I think they have the pieces necessary, and albeit, okay, they don't have Ariel Powers, who was on the championship team, she's in Minnesota. And you have, obviously, Tiana Hawkins, who's with Atlanta, which is their first preseason game. They'll be challenging the Atlanta Dream. So I know that there are pieces that are not coming back. And I know the acquisition of Alicia Clark and then her being injured almost immediately after. I'm holding my forehead while I say that. That was definitely a disappointment because they gave up a lot to get her here. And the fact that she has to miss the season is definitely a downer. But I also like, the fact that they have some young pieces. And I said something about Shook Sutton, but also, they didn't have any draft picks. But last year, Stella Johnson was called the draft pick of this year by Mike Tebow at the end of the year. On the end of the year call, he said, hey, we don't have draft picks, but Stella Johnson can be our draft pick for next season. So I'm anxious to see what they have done. I know Mike Tebow said on a recent call that they have given Shook Sutton in particular a list of things that they wanted her to work on in her game. So yet another point guard, right? We're already talking about Cloud and Mitchell, but yet another point guard add depth in that position to come in, and while being super young, can come in and earn some valuable minutes on the court in game situations. But I mean, the practice time is where it's really at. I mean, they don't have the practice players in their practices right now because of COVID and all of the things. So their numbers are a little bit sparse because they don't have, a lot of the players, as we said, back from overseas commitment. So they're trying to gauge keeping everyone healthy in terms of their minutes, but also ramping up the players who need the extra cardio and the extra reps and the scrimmaging. So they've gone up and down the last couple of days. They had Monday off this week, but they have their first preseason game on Wednesday against Atlanta. So they're trying to build, and I think it's going to take probably 5 or 6 games into the season to really see how this team materializes. But Coach Tebow has said that their offense is ahead of their defense right now, and he's pleased by that, and the leadership that has come from returning players from his system from past years.
Yeah, and I think, you touch on a lot of points, and I want to dissect all of it, but we're going to look forward of kind of put your feet to the fire of what do you think the weakness of this team will be? Because, in my mind, it's defense. They, the losses that we've talked about, Tiana Hawkins, Ariel Powers, I'll even count Christy Tolliver in that because she's a fierce defender. And yes, she wasn't there last year, and technically she already made her way west, but wobble season, a little bit off. Yeah. And LaToya Sanders, who is a key element of their defense, is going to be tough. But honestly, for me, I had those questions coming into the season. The loss of Alicia Clark really makes me go, damn, because she was that player where offensively, I think it's we wonder about how it's going to work with this team because of these different pieces. I don't think we have a question. You have Elena Deladon. There's nobody in the league who's stopping Elena Deladon. When you have a player of that caliber, everybody else on the team gets their flowers, gets their roses. So for me, it's the defense, and you kind of touched on that too, saying that coach said that the offense is further along than the defense. What do you think is going to be the weakness or kind of the question mark of this team?
I think it may be the inside game, and not necessarily who is on the floor, but who's coming behind who's on the floor. I think the bench play of the interior players is going to be something that I'm going to be looking for the Mystics. And yes, you have a Tina Charles in there who can get stops, who can box out and board her butt off. I love it. Obviously, Elena Deladon, when she's in there, but you have Teresa Plaisance, a player that's 6'5", who can really give you that size inside and those boards and that defensive energy that you're looking for. But I think when you're talking about defense, it's not always about, rim protection necessarily. It's how are they getting into the paint? Like, how are those guards getting in here? So I think when you're talking about defense for Washington, I mean, Natasha Cloud is back. So I think automatically that bolsters your pace on the defensive side of the ball with her being on the court, but also Ariel Atkins in that regard. She's so long and lanky. She's so quick in terms of her anticipation, especially off the ball. I just picture her being in the gap off the ball and deflecting it, pushing pace up the sideline. So I just think that, your defense starts with your guards. And for Washington this year to be a stabilizing force on the interior, their guards have to really buckle down and play some staunch defense and not allow Swiss cheese moments into the paint and let players go by. Because if they get by and your next line of defense, which is most likely be your post players, if they get fouls because of that, now we're going to dive into the depth issue, right? So you don't have the depth that you want on the interior, then hey, guess what, guards? Like, you're going to have to lock up that elbow area. You're going to have to pinch that baseline and not allow people to turn the corner down there and give our post players foul trouble. And that's going to be a huge, huge piece and definitely something I'm going to be looking forward to watching. And I know they can do it. I mean, they have the pieces. And, Leilani Mitchell is small and quick and agile, and she can get stops as well. So, I mean, they have the ability, they have the pieces in place on the perimeter to lock down that paint. But you can't just rely on the post like, we have a stopper back there, so I'm good this time to let them go. No, let's not do that. Let's not leave it up to chance and leave it up to, the whistle being blown or not. Let's make sure that we're directing on the perimeter. Let's make sure that we are forcing to the corners and not allowing other opponents' guards to get in the paint and wreak havoc on that second and third line of defense.
Christy, I want to ask you, what do you think, really, I mean, in your opinion, the biggest strength of this team will be? I think for me, it's kind of that veteran mentality. Like, we've been here, we've done that mentality, and I think that goes a long way. But I'm curious your thoughts of the biggest strength of this team.
Well, you said it right there, the experience level. I think, that's something. Yes, they do have some young pieces in there, but the experience level is etched in stone. And you have players who have won championships. You have players who want to win a championship like a Tina Charles. I mean, if you look at what Tina Charles' resume looks like, I mean, every single thing is on there. Gold medalist, Olympian, MVP, Rookie of the Year, like all of these things are in place, but there's one thing missing. And she said that on a recent call. She said, there's one thing missing, and that's a championship. And the way she said that still gives me chills on my arms. Like, she is so ready to win it all. And I believe I asked Ariel Atkins that same question, like, how much does that energize you to have someone around you who wants it that badly? I mean, you've already won it, right? So, and obviously you want to win it again, but Tina Charles hasn't put that ring on her finger yet. And she said that it inspires her every day to be on the court with a player like Tina Charles. And she is exuding that level of passion and intensity and urgency. So I think that's only going to help the experience piece, if you will. I think that her presence alone is something that's going to bolster the mentality of this squad. So yes, the experience of this team is the main key, but also the enticing of winning a ring for a player like a Tina Charles is also there. And I know that Coach Tebow wants that for her as well. They're very close, even though she was on other teams. Like, he has always been super close with Tina Charles, and she was bummed, obviously, last year that she didn't get an opportunity to play, but she is just raring to go. And that's the player I'm going to be eyeballing as well, and what that level of urgency looks like in a player of her caliber.
Well, and even to Pat, what you're saying on the back, I mean, I think for Tina, a player who's been around for so long in search of that, has achieved all these other things, that has got to be a sign for the young players like Atkins who won championships, like Maisha. Like, the mentality is so different when you win it young as opposed to when you have all this personal success, but you can't get that ultimate goal of getting the ring. This is a perfect segue to our last question. I want to know who, I mean, you kind of touched on this, but if you had to pick one player on this team that you think is going to be the key for the success, and I'm gonna give a caveat, you cannot pick Elena Deladon, because everyone, like, we understand injury, minute restrictions early on, which is a huge question mark. Should be getting a lot more attention in regards to that. But I'll go first. I'll ease it on you. I'll go first. Natasha Cloud, because in my opinion, for the years leading up to that championship, it was very clear to me that how Natasha Cloud was the orchestrator of that offense. And last year, while certain players still stepped up, Atkins had a great year last year. Maisha had a great year last year. Some other players did as well. But it always looked a little out of sync offensively. And I think there was this calm and this leadership that we always talk about with Natasha Cloud that was just missing. So I'm going with Cloud. Who do you think is going to be the key player?
Well, I love Cloud, but I'm going with Ariel Atkins. I just think that she gained so much invaluable experience last year, having to really step outside of herself in that way, because she was always a great piece to the puzzle. But last year, I feel like she was the puzzle and the other players were the pieces to the puzzle, if that makes sense. But I just think that she just gained so much competitive maturity. And then for her, obviously, to utilize her voice off the court and to be the voice of the league, not just the team of the Washington Mystics. I think, she just matured over right in front of our eyes, over the course of the season. So I'm going to go with Ariel Atkins, and I think she's going to have another fantastic year. I think, obviously, when she looks to her right and to her left and she sees a Deladon and a Cloud, I mean, she's going to, bear down even harder. And then she's looking straight in front of her and she sees Tina Charles, who wants to win a ring. I just think that she's going to be so motivated by all those factors that she's going to be the linchpin for the Mystics this year.
Side note, I believe her and Tina Thompson are very close, right?
Yes, they are.
I have grown my appreciation for Ariel Atkins so much just because of that. And seeing the social media interactions with them and just watching them train together, there is very few things I love in the WNBA world more than the new age players learning from the legends of the league. I think it's something that, it's amazing to see former players like yourself and former players of the W make their mark known after their career is done playing wise and educating the youth on the W and the amazingness of it. And I think you guys are forming the future. So I want to tip my cap to you and people like Tina Thompson.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And yeah, when Tina Thompson was associate head coach at Texas, when Ariel Atkins was a player there, and she also coached Shug Sutton as well when she was at Texas. So she's very close. Tina Thompson's very close with both of those young ladies and still mentoring them, obviously, in a lot of ways. And you just love to see that, like you said. And it's just so special. It's something that can't be taught. It's just, something that's organically there. And someone like Tina Thompson, who was the first overall pick in the WNBA when the WNBA started. I mean, just to have that cemented in history, and then for her to be able to share what it takes to maintain it. There's one thing to get there, but it's another thing to maintain that level of efficient excellence. And she's sharing that wisdom with them. And that's why they're going to be great players all the way through their careers.
Well, Christy, thank you so much for your time. And I mean, yeah, I'm excited to hopefully see you in person at a game. Maybe we can enjoy, fingers crossed, and to have you on again. Just, I love the way you broke down some of the stuff here, and we're going to bother you for many more years to come, bringing you on the show. So thank you so much.
Oh, I love it. And it's never a bother. It's all hoops. I love it. I have a passion for it, and it's bigger than basketball. There's so many life skills intertwined in it, and which is why I will never retire from my love of the game. I love it so much. Thank you, guys.
You have a great day.
Thank you.
You too.